Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Who are the UFO silencers? Have men in black ever carried out their threats? What do we really know about them, and where do they really come from?
Well, you're going to need to give me the script, because we didn't think of having an extra copy, mostly
Guess who's back?
Yes, I am back, Ben here, for the 463rd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and this is the last Monday where I was supposed to not be here, but here I am, because, you know, everything happens for a reason.
All right, yeah, this particular reason is Professor canceled class. But anyway, before we introduce our guest, I want to wish a very happy Canada Day to our Canadian listeners, and have a happy Canada Day. Our guest this evening is one of the greatest names in the paranormal, the legendary TGB, Timothy Green Beckley. He's a UFO and paranormal pioneer, author and publisher, producer. And Tim says that his life has pretty much been revolved around the paranormal since childhood. He reports having his first out-of-the-body experience at the age of 6 and saw his first 3 UFOs at the age of 10. In the early 1970s, he founded the UFO Investigators League, and over the years has written over 30 books on everything from rock music to the secret Majestic 12 UFO papers. Today, he is the president of Inner Light Global Communications and editor of the Conspiracy Journal and Bizarre. You'll have to see that written down. He's the author of Mystery of the Men in Black, which is our concern this evening, with an intro by the late, great John Keel. And Tim also was a friend, our local listeners will be interested in hearing, of our good friend and much missed Joe Ferrier, who was a DJ, well, not a DJ, but a show host on this show, the afternoon talk show, for over 50 years. And Tim himself was a guest of Joe's in the early 1970s, I believe, and I'm sure maybe we can have some time to share some memories about our good old friend Joe Ferrier, who was a very well-known UFO investigator in his own right in the late 1960s, in the early and late 1960s and onward. So anyway, Tim's websites include conspiracyjournal.com and teslasecretlab.com. So,
all right, so Tim Beckley, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, you know, this is a show that's a long time coming, and I'm so happy to be on the air. You know, yes, I was actually in your studio.
Wow.
Back, it would have been in the 1960s. Yeah, it would have been in the 1960s, and Joe was the host. And in fact, there is a photograph of Joe and I around the microphone that was printed in a newspaper called a tabloid. Called Midnight, which is now the Globe. It changed its name over the years, and you could see that I'm a wee adolescent at that point. I don't know. I must have been maybe all of 19 years old, if even that. You know, in those days we actually did live shows. There was hardly any telephoning. If you wanted to be on the air, you went to the studio, and I had a nice trip and a very enjoyable show. And you know, Joe used to publish his own little UFO. Publication. I think it was called Unexplained Phenomena, with a fellow from the same area there by the name of Armand Laprade. And so we used to exchange magazines when I was a teenager, and it was an enjoyable experience, and I'm glad to be back on the air with you fellas.
Well, we're really proud to have you, Tim, not only for your own for your own sake, but for Joe's as well. And let me give our phone numbers to call in this evening for everybody, if anybody would like to do so, especially to maybe share memories about Joe. Locally, of course, 401-766-1240. Right, Ben took it up. And the number for USA or Canada, anywhere therein, I should say, 800-449-1240. So give us a call if you'd like. So, Ben, take it away.
Alrighty, so let's kick it right off with the questions here. So what are the Men in Black, and when did they first appear in history?
Well, you know, there is a certain side of ufology that we seldom hear about. I call it the dark side of ufology, and the Men in Black are part of that. Now, when we say Men in Black, we're talking about probably several different groups. There's really no way to pinpoint this, but there are some that are obviously government agents. They dress and they look like Secret Service and OSI and Air Force intelligence, and they probably are. They go around subtly threatening UFO witnesses to give up their data or to remain silent. Then there's another, what I would consider to be more paranormal aspect to this. You know, a lot of researchers in UFO and ufology are running around looking for spaceships from, beyond the solar system. I was going to say beyond Mars, but most of us would probably realize that unless there's some gang of 3 living underground on Pluto or something, more than likely we have to look outside of our own solar system for any sort of intelligence. These are not common astronauts that are coming here. This is more of a, as far as I'm concerned, a more psychic-based phenomena, something that has been with us from the beginning of time. Perhaps it's even a secret civilization that coexists with us here on the planet, maybe living inside the Earth or maybe living undersea. In fact, a lot of UFOs are associated with sightings around naval vessels and objects coming in and out of the water and so forth. So
yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, so... by the way, before I forget, Larry Warren and Peter Robbins say hello. I just had a meeting with them.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh, yeah, very dear friends, yeah. Larry was wonderful when we visited Rendlesham Forest in September.
Oh, yes, indeed he said that, yes. He was here with his son and his father-in-law.
Outstanding.
Anyway, to get back to the subject at hand, the other group, this paranormal group, they're a little bit more ragtag. In fact, people say, well, what do the men in black look like? Well, of course, the real men in black usually wear black hats, they wear sunglasses, they appear in researchers' homes without entering through the front door or without permission, perhaps. They come and go at their own choosing, they materialize and dematerialize. They are supernatural entities of some sort, shapeshifters, perhaps. The best example of this I can give is if you watch the movie The Blues Brothers. Well, ironically enough, kind of a ragtag, the couple of guys there. Well, Dan Aykroyd is very attuned to the UFOs. In fact, he had a Men in Black experience himself. So I understand that the characters, the Blues Brothers, kind of took that persona. I mean, he did that deliberately when he did wrote the script. So that's kind of there's just the real Men in Black, there's just something not right about them.
I'm thinking I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, well, that's what I was just going to say. They do not fit into, I come from, the State Department. They seem to be something a little bit weirder, something a little bit more esoteric in nature. Now, I've come up with the theory that since the UFO beings, ufonauts, whatever you want to call them, I call them ultra-terrestrials instead of
ultra-terrestrials, right?
Like ultra-terrestrials. I don't think they're coming here from Mars or Venus or from outer space. There may be a few. I mean, Stanton Friedman has got a good gauge on this. He's running around looking for physical evidence of crashed UFOs. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, we've got to look beyond that. We've got to look to other dimensions. We've got to look to underground the civilizations. We've got to look to underwater ways.
No, I certainly agree. As a matter of fact, there is a tendency, as I understand it, in the UFO field now to be looking at other areas of the paranormal, and Ben and I really run into that. We, of course, I started out in the early 70s and when I was in the seminary in ghost research, and of course that's why I'm not a priest, is because they didn't like me doing that. But in any case, when Ben joined me in 2005, when he became old enough to do so, I became very interested in pursuing cases with his point of view as well. And I tend to be more scholarly, I suppose, in my approach. But Ben he's less cerebral and more, I suppose you might even say, shamanic or psychic or whatever.
Cerebral?
Yes. I'm going to hear that all evening. And so we would, I think, form something of a team. So we began to investigate cases literally for years, and we almost always run into UFO implications toward the end. And I'm thinking of this one case we're always talking about on the air as much as we can, and it's in central Connecticut, and it started with quote-unquote ghosts and ended up with grays, government agents, and a possible base and research.
We even had one of our a fan of our show write in and say, "Oh, hey, we had a poltergeist case, and the poltergeist turned into a gray."
Yeah, and so it really makes you wonder. So, what say you on all that?
Well, yes, I definitely agree with you. In fact, many years ago, I'd seen a little article in the New York City paper here, like 2 paragraphs filler, about a UFO that had landed in a small farmer's field. In fact, it turned out it was almost like his backyard. It was said in the newspaper to be like a cornfield or something, but it was the guy's backyard. I mean, I don't think he had an acre of corn. And supposedly the object had landed, had some kind of suction cups, or a tripod landing gear, and had made an indentation in the ground and in the corn. It wasn't a crop circle; it was a corn impression. Something I don't know if you've had Ted Phillips on. He's the one that does the.
Oh, we've had him on several times. He was on only a few weeks ago.
Oh, wonderful! I just had a taped interview that I did with him. I do a series of DVDs called Unfair, Unbalanced, Unedited, where I just go around and kind of swing my the video stand up in front of get some good information that way.
Ted is great.
Anyway, back to F.
Yeah, you're kind of breaking up here, Tim.
Okay. How about, is that any better?
Actually, yeah, it sounds much better.
All right, good. I probably had my hand over the. We've had some bad storms here today, to say the least. I'm in the Manhattan area.
Yeah.
That means it's going to hit us. So
yeah, right.
Terrible.
Sooner or later.
Of course, you don't know the weather. We could be in Death Valley, so we're lucky we're not.
That's true.
That's
yes,
right.
That's very true.
Anyway, we went out to Athens, Ohio, and I had some business near Cincinnati, so this wasn't too far away. It wasn't like I hopped on a plane and went 1,000 miles just to look at a cornfield. But I went and I interviewed the fellow whose home this thing landed behind, and apparently he said his grandson had seen this thing come down out of the sky and it landed, glowing ball or something like that, and then the next day they went out in the morning and there was a depression on the ground. Okay, well, it was a couple of weeks since the incident happened, and by the time I got there, the corn had unflattery, and it was just, back to the way it was. So there's no real evidence there. But I decided, well, this is a pretty rural area. Let me stake out the neighborhood and see if there's any collaborating witnesses, if anybody else had seen anything. Well, I knocked on a few doors, and just about everybody that I talked to, now, they had not seen the object that night come down and land in the cornfield, but they had experiences of their own. We're talking about men in black. We're talking about Bigfoot. Now, Bigfoot, we think of him as this big, hairy giant, kind of scratching and shuffling along through the woods of the forest, But he's been seen in just about every state, as far as I know.
Yeah, including Rhode Island here.
Oh, indeed, yes. In fact, I remember years ago interviewing 2 teenagers who said that they saw Bigfoot stumbling across a golf course in Staten Island. So where do these things go? I mean, there's no big area where he could be hanging out with his family or friends.
Yeah, he could be playing the back nine.
And we've had other cases where people. I remember one incident down in Florida where a night security guard had actually cornered one of these things and backed it up into a truck. Into an 18-wheeler or something. Okay, and they could hear him rumbling around inside and pounding on the doors and so forth. He called the backup security. He figures, well, here I've got the evidence that there's really a Bigfoot and he's live and he's inside the truck. Well, they opened up the truck. All that remained of the Bigfoot creature was this horrible smell. He had disappeared. So where did he go to? We have to be talking about something paranormal here because he didn't walk through the backside of the truck and
exactly
into the swamp. Yeah. So in this case in Athens, Ohio, I remember one woman said, well, she could hear Bigfoot behind her home pounding on the air conditioner. And I said, well, how do you know that it was Bigfoot? She said, well, I'd go out, in the morning after I knew he wasn't there, and there were the big footprints in the muddy soil underneath the air conditioner with the water,
Oh, exactly. Tim, we have a caller. Okay, if I may. It's Bob from Cumberland, Rhode Island. Bob, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Hi, good evening, Paul and Ben.
Good evening. You have a question for Tim Beckley?
I sure do. It's a real treat to ask you this question. I've followed your career for a while. Tim, if anybody knows anything about this, it's you. Just a quick question. What is your take on the supposed diary of Admiral Richard Byrd of his flight beyond the poles back in the South Pole?
Well, of course, I've published quite a few books on the subject. Commander X is one of our authors. He's this retired military intelligence operative. Apparently, Admiral Byrd did have a diary in which he talked about going to this area at the pole where there was no ice, no snow, regular normal temperature. There were apparently beings that were living there, like 9 foot tall, I think. It sounds pretty incredible. But somebody actually got back to me and said that they talked to a member of the family, and the family would not deny it. And to me, the whole idea that there's a civilization inside the Earth, and that you could enter through the North and the South Pole, seems pretty darn incredible. It goes against everything that we've ever been taught in school. But then, the further you get into investigating all the paranormal aspects of our lives, you realize that we haven't been taught anything in school that really offers too much in the way of spiritual or psychic development.
Yeah, physical evidence shows that it's more likely that the Earth is hollow. Explorers have found.
I don't go quite that far. My concept is that there is a vast cavern or tunnel system that exists around the Earth. Apparently, that was developed by ancients, whether during the time of Atlantis or before. Really hard to say at this point, but that these tunnel systems and these pockets of civilization have actually been taken over, perhaps by extraterrestrials or perhaps by individuals who once lived on the surface and for one reason or another had to go underground. So I don't rule out the concept that some of these objects may be physical craft from somewhere else here, but I do think that the majority of UFOs can be put in the same category as ghosts or spirits. In fact, I always like to say that the same thing that happens inside a haunted house or during a spiritualist circle is the same thing that happens at a UFO landing site.
Does that answer your question, Bob?
Because it's multidimensional, probably. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably are.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Well, that's one thing we always get into, Tim, and I started arriving at that conclusion, incorrect or correct, in the 1970s when I just couldn't explain what I was seeing with the classical spiritualist approach. There had to be something multidimensional going on, and that seems to be the theory and the methods I developed from it, and now Ben and I use them, and that's what I've done ever since, and it makes a lot more sense, and we get a lot more results than thinking it's spirits of dead people and all this other.
It's like the paranormal or whatever. It's like a buffet of theories, whatever works best for you, usually. But of course, what we've experienced is entirely different from what other people experience. But of course, someone brought up on our show yesterday that it's what you bring to the phenomena is what you get out of it.
That is true. In fact, that's why, there's a tendency in the UFO field to ridicule and put down others if they don't have the same theory or explanation or the same concepts as you do. Well, my feeling after all these years is that we're all into this together, regardless of whether we want to be or not. Now, I don't know whether it's a mass, mind, the probe, or something, or whether we're being directed. But why would people devote their lives to this? Unless there was something really directing them to do so. And I do believe that the intelligence behind all of this doesn't care too much what we believe as long as we believe.
Yeah, I think there's a point to that. Ben, did you have something else?
I lost it.
I was going to point out, I'm wondering about ancient history, Tim. I have heard theories, and I did not hear this in the seminary because this would not be the party line by any means, but for example, the three angels in Genesis who approach Abraham, and that they just before Sodom and Gomorrah get cooked and all this stuff, as being ancient examples of men in black. I mean, are you aware of how far back the man in black phenomenon, regardless of its origin, might go?
Well, I'm not a big biblical scholar. I leave that to my writer, Sean Castile, who is an associate of ours and has assisted in writing many of our books. We have about 170 or 80 titles that we've published. I've been doing this since I was 14 years old, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, okay. Let me before I go into the history of this, let me just say kind of how I got into this.
Sure.
There's a weird thing with me and synchronicity and coincidences that we could do a whole show on that. In fact, I would like to do that because I think you guys would be a little more into it than your typical talk show host. But back when I was in the 3rd or the 4th grade, I had to write my first book review. Well, I cannot say that I was an avid reader, although my mother used to sit here and we would listen to the shows on the radio, like the Lone Ranger and Old Time Talkies, and then she would read to me, and I enjoyed reading her reading more than I guess I enjoyed reading myself. And most books that they give you to read when you're in school, you sit there and you want to square, like crawl into the ground or something because it's just not something you're really interested in reading. But I guess we had a little bit more liberal teacher, and we didn't have a playlist or a reading list or something like that, so we could pick a book of our own to review.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I picked the book I Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. This book was written by Gray Barker. Now, ironically enough, probably 8 or 10 years later, Gray Barker published my first 3 books. And when he passed away, I bought the last 50 hardcover copies of They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers from his estate. Anyway, that was the kicker. That's how it started. They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers was a book written, the first book written about the Men in Black. It told the story of one Albert K. Bender, a Bridgeport, Connecticut resident, who was the head of the International Flying Saucer Bureau with thousands of members all over the planet. Albert K. Bender was a serious researcher of UFOs, and he put out a monthly newsletter called Space Review. And in one particular issue, probably in its second year of existence, he came up with a number of theories as to the origin of UFOs. One of them was that there was a base actually at the North or South Pole. Shortly after, in fact, before the issue was published, he had only talked about what was going to be in the particular issue to a couple of researchers, maybe Gray Barker, August C. Roberts, Dominic Lucchesi, some of the old pioneers in the field, about what he was planning to publish. Several days later, there was a knock at the door. He was the first person in modern time, apparently, to be visited, or at least the case that's well represented in history, by 3 men in black. They warned him not to publish his newsletter on the subject. They told him he was coming too close to the secret of UFOs, and the powers that be wished him to back off, not to release his findings for the betterment of the world and the betterment of civilization, or the safety of the world or civilization. So Albert K. Bender, despite the fact that he had correspondents and members all over the world, shut down the International Flying Saucer Bureau. Now, at the same time that he was having these, I guess, pretty frequent visits by the Men in Black. Now, at first they appeared on his doorstep, but years later he did reveal that they appeared and disappeared inside of his apartment without having to enter through the front door. Apparently they were able to materialize and dematerialize Some people claim that the Men in Black actually get into their dreams, kind of like a Freddy Krueger thing, you know?
Yeah.
They get into their dreams, and they also are able to control their mental, faculties. In fact, we've published a lot of books on this type of thing, and what I always tell people is, of course, they can sign up for a free subscription to the Conspiracy Journal at conspiracyjournal.com, or they can just go to Amazon and type in my name, Timothy Beckley, Beckley, and hundreds of books on all these subjects will appear. And they can either order them from Amazon, or they can get in touch with me, because we give free DVDs away with all of our orders.
Yeah, we're going to give you a chance to talk about and promote your material, but we do have to take a break right now.
All right.
Okay, and you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our fascinating guest, the great Timothy Green Beckley. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Greg Bell, the host of When Radio Was.
Why, Mortimer! Is that you under that blindfold?
With this thing on, I can't see who I am.
No, I imagine not. Can't you see anything at all under that blindfold?
On a clear day, I can see the blindfold.
You can?
Yeah.
When Radio Was, shows from the past for today's imaginations.
When Radio Was airs Monday through Friday, right here on ON 1240 Radio at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Paul. Actually, I'm Ben. And this guy over here is Paul. In a parallel universe,
what's my line?
I am Paul. We're all Paul. We all scream for Paul. With our wonderful guest, Tim Beckley, talking of Men in Black.
Oh, yeah, before we get back to Tim, though, I wanted to just tell you about the two charities Ben and I have, well, three really, Ben and I have adopted, just very quickly. USA Cares, they provide financial assistance to veterans and their families who've been wounded in post-9/11 active duty. And it's a great organization. Check it out, usacares.org. Also, locally here, Builders Helping Heroes. They're building a wonderful home together with Homes for Our Troops, for Taunton, Mass-based organization, out in Burrillville, Rhode Island, here right in our local listening area. And you can check them out, buildershelpingheroes.org. It's a charity of the Rhode Island Builders Association, so please check that out. And also, Canadian Veterans Advocacy. Bill Blaze founded this excellent organization which advocates for our Canadian veterans, and just doing a wonderful job up there. And as you know, Canada has stood by us from day one in the War on Terror, and it's a great organization, too. So let's get back to our subject. Ben, do you want to start off, or I have a couple of questions?
Yeah. I actually... referring to what we were just talking about here, where you mentioned, Mr. Beckley, that there was one instance where Men in Black materialized in somebody's home, or they came in without his knowledge. Now, I remember hearing stories that they wouldn't come in unless invited, or am I just completely making this up?
Well, I think you got that in the Legend of Dracula.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
No, I have heard. I've heard the same thing too, but I don't think that's the case. I never run into anyone who said, "Well, I invited them in." I've heard a couple of people say I slammed the door in their face, but I don't think so. Hey, anyway, to get back to your question, you wanted to know what were the earliest cases of the Men in Black. I found one from 1864 from a small community in Texas. It told about a UFO or a ship, a vehicle of some sort that came over the town and dropped debris. And like the town was a garbage dump or something like that, right? Now, this is, in fact, we'll get into another case, the Maury Island incident. This seems to happen quite frequently. I mean, it's like they jettison their junk. We had a case it was just on the TV here the other night, where something fell through the roof of somebody's home, and they thought, well, it was from an overhead plane, but apparently that's not the case either. Nobody knows quite what it is. It doesn't look like any kind of alien artifact, but, things are falling from the sky all the time. Good old Charles Fort there spent most of his life in the library, digging into old scientific journals and stuff, looking for falls from the sky. Anyway, back to 1864. This object had apparently dumped some debris, and a shopkeeper had gotten a hold of one of the artifacts. And, it never explained in the article what the artifact was or even what it looked like. Anyway, he put it in the store window. Well, someone come a-knocking a couple of days later, kind of a curious-looking guy, kind of tall, dressed in black, kind of dusty, just like he got off the, down from the mountains or the desert or something like that. And it was inquiring about the object in the window. Could he buy it? And the owner of the shop said, sorry, it's not for sale. So the individual left the shop, never to be seen again. But the next morning when the proprietor came back, the object was missing from the window, but it didn't look like anyone had broken into the shop. So something right there out of the twilight zone.
Yeah, very
back during the 1897 UFO flap, San Francisco, I think even in Maine, there were some incidences where, well, I don't know if they were necessarily men in black, but they were individuals who kind of gave out preposterous stories. They said that they were from Cuba, or they said that they spoke in a French accent or something like that, just to kind of cover their tracks. It seemed like they didn't really want to be discovered as they went about, fixing their craft, or goodness knows really what they're up to, And so they gave out kind of dumb and stupid stories. 1903 in the UK, there was a UFO flap that most people are not even aware of. In fact, in our version of Disclosure, that's the title of the book, you'll find a photograph that was taken of a cigar-shaped object during that flap. I don't think it's ever been published, certainly not in this country before, but there were men in black there who were going around telling people not, that they were dirigibles or, balloons or what have you, and not to worry, no mass panic, and so forth. Then the first case that has gotten actual publicity and promotion over the years took place on June 22nd, 1947. Now, this was 2 days before the Kenneth Arnold sighting that kicked off the flying saucer phenomena, as we've come to know it today. There was a sighting at Kenneth Arnold of 9 objects over Mount Rainier in Washington State. Boy Island, an island off the coast of Tacoma, Washington. Several gentlemen are out fishing on their boat when this donut-shaped, as I understand it, object comes overhead and starts spewing some sort of molten slag from the bottom of the craft. It kills their dog and damages their boat. They had several samples of the slag that they kept. I guess they fished out of the water. Maybe it actually even hit part of the boat, Mm-hmm. And they had a whole series of UFO poltergeist the phenomena. And they were in a room with Kenneth Arnold actually later on telling their story. And apparently someone was listening into their conversation. In those days, bugging a room was not kind of like it is today, where you got to, you can find a bug in 3 different corners by 3 different agencies. That was the first. There were actual men in black that showed up. Ken Thomas, I don't know if you've had him on the show, but he's a big conspiracy.
No, we know who he is. I haven't had him on.
Oh yeah, he could tell you, he could spend the whole hour on Maury Island. Then also too what's his name? Albert K. Bender. Now, at the same time that he was having his run-in with these the trio, the Men in Black, his co-workers in Australia and New Zealand were also being harassed. One of the head of the local International Flying Saucer Bureau organization there, his branch in Australia, the gentleman was up.
Tim?
Okay, Tim, you with us? Oh, dropped off. Men in Black got him.
Of course.
Okay. Well, I want to try and get him back, Ben. I'll continue yakking here.
All right. You yak away.
Well, we've been listening to Timothy Green Beckley, a legendary UFO expert who has also been involved in other areas of the paranormal and sort of agrees with us that we've got something going on here that goes way beyond little green men or people from other planets or this sort of thing, or from the other end, way beyond ghosts and poltergeists and this sort of thing. And he seems to have had similar experiences, not experiences, or at least studies that have paralleled our own, that find when you look at many ghost phenomena or even Bigfoot or any of these other things, you will somehow get tied in eventually, if you look long enough, with UFO phenomena. In our opinion, what's going on here is that it's our good old multiverse theory that we don't have, a material world and a spirit world. We have many different universes parallel to our own, such as is theorized in quantum mechanics. And it's becoming less theory and becoming more of a fact because people are out building quantum computers and they're using various multiversal principles in scientific work. And this is something that is becoming quite accepted among physicists now. I believe that it's up in the 90 percentile where physicists accept this multiple worlds, parallel worlds idea. Now the question is, what does it mean? Many don't interpret it the way we do, that you can wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, as we were talking about last night in preparation for our documentary we're doing for the new Warner Brothers film, The Conjuring, that you can wake up at that hour and somehow see somebody walking through your room, and it's got to be the spirit of some dead person. Well, in fact, what we think we're dealing with is an actual person passing through in a parallel world, perhaps sharing the same space as yourself, and maybe doesn't even know you're there. So I think, do we have our guest back?
I am here. So the Men in Black have tried to silence me once more, but they have done it again.
That's what we thought. Whenever we talk about this, Tim, all kinds of weird, and I'm sure it happens to you.
I was just telling that to Carol, my assistant here. I said, every time it seems like I do a show, and it's about the MIBs, that I get cut off the air. Now, it's got to be beyond coincidence, although I have to say we got some pretty lousy weather here. The Internet hasn't been working. My landline's not working.
Yeah.
I won't even step outside the door. But to get back to the researcher there in Australia, he was standing at the top of an escalator in a department store, and all of a sudden some invisible hand or something pushed him down the escalator. Well, he had a series. His girlfriend was even being harassed by some smelly little creature from God knows where. And finally, he also decided to throw in the towel. In fact, our book, First of the Men in Black, has the whole story. It's kind of an interesting story. I've actually heard the gentleman tell. He's long since deceased now, but there was a tape recording, or in those days it was a cassette, that was going around of him describing the details of his experience, and we had a heck of a time translating it. Very heavy accent. But, anyway, it was a very heavy period, those early 1950s for the Men in Black. But I had my own Men in Black experience.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and in fact, I have been on the UFO Hunters, and I got an episode of Bill Shatner's Weirder What coming out on the Sci-Fi Channel, I think in a week or two. It's episode 2 of the 3rd season. Anyway, back in 1965, there was a huge UFO flap up and down the East Coast. The big years for flying saucers, of course, were 1947, 1952 when they buzzed the White House, 1957 when they were landing in the Southwest and conking out automobile engines and leaving impressions on the ground and so forth. And then in 1965, 66, 67, there was an immense public interest and an outcry on the subject. I think it all started like in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the college students looked out their window and they saw these objects, and then Dr. Hynek, who was working for the Air Force at the time, came forward and said, "Oh, it was just swamp gas." But apparently it wasn't. Anyway, during that period of time, 1965, there were a number of sightings in New Jersey, and they involved not just the landing of UFO craft, but of creatures. I don't know exactly if I remember the exact description of the creatures, but probably in a lot of those cases they were these what we call little men. About 3 or 4 feet tall. They come out of the craft. Mm-hmm. They scoop up some sand or some soil. They shoot a paralyzing ray at the witness, who can't move for 20 minutes till after the craft is gone. and then there may be some slight evidence of actually having been to the scene of the landing, some indentions in the ground. There's the scoop marks of where they took the soil and the sand and the plant life, or so forth and so on. So there were some sightings around Elizabeth, and I was at that time working for Jim Mosley, who just recently passed on here. He was one of the pioneers of UFO research, and he had a magazine called Saucer News, and I was managing editor. Well,
I have some copies of that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In fact, let me see. Jack Robinson was one of his associates, and Jack lived over in Jersey City. Now, you get to Jersey City from Manhattan by the PATH train in about 15 or 20 minutes. So Jack's wife, Mary Robinson, would call us on a periodic basis to say that Jack worked, his real job was working at a bank in Manhattan. When Jack would leave to work to take the PATH train over to the city, Mary would go out and do her grocery shopping and errands and visit her neighbors. She was big on people visiting. In those days, people visited their neighbors. They didn't just text message.
Right.
And, yeah, right. Oh, my God, I've never seen my neighbor, but I've heard from them 15 times today.
That's right.
So, okay, so Mary would claim that on the way to do her errands or on the way back home, there was a strange gentleman standing in the doorway of the building next door. And it looked like he was monitoring the activities of people coming in and out of her building. Now, I've been to Jack's house many times. They both passed away many, many years ago. I can't remember the layout that much, to be honest with you. This was, 3 decades or more ago.
Yeah, I hear you.
It seemed to me they lived in a small walk-up, maybe 5 or 6 apartments. They lived on the first floor, I believe it was. Anyway, so Mary would call our office. Now, we didn't get there very early. Jim never got up before noon. I think I had to be there by about 11:30 to start answering the phone. We actually got people called up and ordered magazines, before the Internet, of course. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know whether Mary was just kind of, feeding us a line to keep us interested or keep her husband on the masthead or whatever. So we decided one day that we're going to pay the Robinsons a visit without letting them know that we're coming. We're going to do a little clandestine operation here behind the scenes. So we get into Jim's car. Jim is driving, and I'm in the passenger seat up front. And we go over to Jersey City. Traffic is pretty light going out of the city at that time of the morning. I guess we get there maybe about 8:30, 8:45. People are double parked on the street, of course. And we see actually a black Cadillac, black car, parked there. And sure enough, here's a gentleman standing in a doorway. The photograph has been published. You can find it on the Internet. If you go to YouTube, you can find that episode of UFO Hunters. Just type in the silencers, and the story there starts about 8 minutes into that particular episode, and the photograph is shown.
Mm-hmm.
We see this fellow in the doorway. Jim hands me his camera. I stick my head out the window. I take a shot of the individual. I take a shot of the car. Okay, there was a few cars behind us, and like I say, people would double park. So we decided we're going to go around the corner and perhaps try to park, or Jim will let me jump out at some point, and I'll go and ask this individual what he's doing there, staring down the Robinson's apartment building. Now, let me point out that during this period of time, not only was this individual standing there, but Jack claims that his telephone was being tapped. Somebody was listening in on his conversations, especially when he was talking about this case that he investigated of the teenagers who had seen these creatures come down in the park, scoop up the soil, just like I had described, right? His telephone was being tapped, and some of his files, it looked like it was being rifled through. Somebody had gone through them, stuff was, he'd come home, didn't look like nobody had broken in, nobody else had the key, but stuff would be, laying on the floor as if somebody was trying to disassemble his filing efforts. Anyway, so we come back around the corner, and the car is gone, and the gentleman standing in the doorway has gone. And strangely enough, we seem to have frightened off the men in black because he was never seen, nor were the Robinsons bothered after that. So maybe there is something to this idea that, you know, if you don't want them there, then, you know, they will dissolve into thin air. Now, people ask me, well, who are these men in black? Well, I've come up with a theory. My theory is that these individuals, these weird-looking individuals that have been seen around UFO landing sites and silencing witnesses and all, I believe that these are Earthlings that has been taken over, through mind control, and that they are actually doing the bidding of some other intelligence that cannot take on physical form.
That's an interesting theory.
And then at some point, it's like a hypnotic trance. They come out of it, and they have no recollection of actually being used as a pawn of the dark side of ufology.
Huh. Well, before we finish burning up the hour, which we're doing very quickly, I wanted to give you a chance, Tim, to talk about your books, website, anything else you'd like to promote, and where people can find out more about you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, my personal email, and I don't mind hearing from people, especially if they have experiences they want to share. In fact, I met a gal recently, a lady who lives in upstate New York. I call her the MIB lady. Her name is Claudia Cunningham. And she happens to be like the local expert on the MIBs up around Albany. In fact, there's a cemetery there that seems to be literally haunted. It's the Albany Rural Cemetery. And black cars have been seen to go down gravel paths, but they make no sound.
Mm-hmm.
And they go down paths that actually have chains going across them. And of course, when other people try to follow, they can't get down the particular lane in the cemetery. There's a lot more to it. There's also dogs with glowing eyes, and a couple that fly over the tombstones at night in their pajamas. It's quite the place for a good paranormal investigation. In fact, maybe we ought to do a remote from there someday. I think that would be an exciting possibility.
That would be fun.
Anyway, my email address is Mr. UFO8, MRUFO8 at hotmail.com. The website where you can sign up for free, and we send out glossy magazines through the mail, and we don't charge, but we do like you to buy some of our products and all that. We keep going that way. We call it controlled circulation, would be conspiracyjournal.com. I've written so many books and published so many things. We just did a book that's been a popular seller for over 100 years called The Dweller on Two Planets by Philos. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but
no.
Shirley MacLaine says it's the book that turned her onto the New Age. She was in a bookstore in Hong Kong, and it fell into her hands as she went down the aisle. Now, the book, I was selling it back when I was 14 or 15 years old, but the book is kind of difficult to read. It's channeled messages from Atlantis and from an ancient Tibetan, and then he reincarnates into somebody in the Old West. It's about 500 pages. It'll take you a while to read it. You get your money's worth. Anyway, our version of it is called the Secrets of Mount Shasta and a Dweller on Two Planets, about 500 pages long, and it's just been put up on Amazon. But if you email me, we'll send you the catalogs and all that literature. The books on the Men in Black would be the UFO Silencers, Mysteries of the Men in Black. That one has been out for quite a number of years. And the more recent one is called The Curse of the Men in Black, Return of the UFO Terrorist.
Very interesting. Check it out, folks. Not something you hear every day. I was curious, Tim, to ask you, of course, these people do, if they are people, do threaten UFO witnesses or sometimes other witnesses with things that aren't necessarily good. Are you aware of any cases in which threats have been carried out? When people have not backed off?
Maybe some of these people that have disappeared. We've got a long list of people who have vanished
that's true.
without a trace. Some of them were involved in UFOs. Some of them have had mysterious suicides. I'm thinking offhand of Phil Snyder, who claims that he was a guard at the Dulce underground UFO base. We know of a couple of cases. Well, now, there was one case going back to the 1960s, a big flap again in New Jersey at the Wanakee Reservoir. Security guards were seeing these objects on a regular basis coming over the reservoir. Some of them were actually shooting down beams of light onto the frozen ice. We did an article back for Fate magazine back in, I guess it would have been about 1966 or so, on the subject. I know Phyllis Goldie, the publisher, I'm sure she still has copies in stock. So I think I got one from her recently. But they had a town hall meeting. I mean, there was a big uproar because everybody in town was seeing them. You know, when these things catch on, they catch on. You know, and you can tell people that you're blue in the face that it's the planet Venus. It's Saturn. 200 million miles closer to Earth. Whatever. People know what they saw. I mean, people are not that stupid. Sometimes you can be fooled. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've seen things in the sky, and I go, "Oh, this is unusual." And then it dawned on me, well, maybe it wasn't as unusual as I thought it was. But at this one particular town hall, somebody posted recently on a UFO blog that they actually were told not to speak about this, and one of these MIBs, this would be more of the FBI type, earthly-looking guys, kind of flipped their jacket aside, and they could see that they had a firearm there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a subtle threat. But no, most of these threats are what I would call psychic manipulation. They're going to make you go mad.
Yeah. Well, before we run out of time here, I wanted to ask you about a local incident, and you and I discussed this by email, the Raymore Bollock incident that Joe Ferry reported in his magazine in the late 60s. And the person who reported these encounters with this person, Raymore Bollock, still is alive, to the best of my knowledge, and living in this area, so I won't give his name.
Harold, is it?
I beg your pardon?
Is it Harold?
No, I don't. I know who you mean. No, that was not. It was not Harold.
No.
The best. No. So what was happening here was people
may not realize, but a friend of mine, Harold Sulkin, not the Harold I was just referring to, is deceased as well. Put together a magazine special with Joe back in the 60s that included some absolutely incredible UFO photographs. These were as good as anything Billy Meyer has taken. Except I don't believe Billy Meyer's photos. I believe that Joe's pictures were the real McCoy. And I do know that Joe had an experience with this couple. They got in the car, and there were some mysterious black boxes, because I've heard your show on it 3 times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's dark.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm afraid we are just about out of time, but we're going to be in touch with you, and we're going to schedule some more shows if you're willing, because it's been really fascinating.
You guys are incredible. I mean, you're the real McCoy, the meat and the potatoes here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah, as Mark Twain said, I can live 6 months on one good compliment. So, Tim, we want to thank you, and hope you get through the weather down there. It's been a great show, and we'll be in touch.
You betcha. Goodbye. Have a good evening, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. Timothy Green Beckley, conspiracyjournal.com. Check it out. Very, very interesting stuff. Okay. I wanted to, of course, mention once again that Ben is back. We're very happy with that, and you should be with us hopefully till the next semester begins.
Oh, no, I planned it so I'll be here even through that semester.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to fill me in on that. I'm only your father. What the heck do I know? Anyway.
Or maybe you just don't remember because you focus all your brain power on other things.
That's true. Yes, I have a lot of things to focus on.
Indeed.
And we suggest you stay, if you dare, if you really can handle it, stay tuned for the City Council meeting at 7 o'clock right here on WOON 1240 AM. So, many thanks to our producer, the great Ben Eno, tonight. And next week, July 8th, we will welcome back not only... Ben, of course, but our good friend Susan Shepard for a discussion of auras, something we've never talked about on the show before. And so get your questions in now to Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com, Ben at BehindTheParanormal.com, or use the handy question form at our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com.
And on our regular CBS radio edition on Sunday, July 7th in Pittsburgh, Boston, Detroit, /Windsor, and Seattle and Vancouver. And on radio.com, we will be back with the great Nick Redfern for a discussion on strange creatures, the classified documents.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear that. Obviously, we never would reveal anything classified on the air. However, this is the title of a book that he's written, so we'll let him do it. Anyway, okay, so in any case, Nick Redfern, as you know, is was born in the UK, lives here in the United States.
And he still has a very thick accent.
He does, but that's no problem for most people.
No,
he has written a number of books.
Makes him sound more intelligent.
Yes, people often think that anyone with an English accent sounds more intelligent. But in any case, Nick is a well-known monster hunter sort of fellow with his feet on the ground. He's a very scientifically oriented fellow and ties this into all sorts of interesting phenomena that might accompany the cryptid situation. So in any case, we leave you this evening with a thought from none other than Dr. Seuss. Sometimes questions are complicated and the answers are simple. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.